It is 10:30 and I'm going to get started as people continue to join. And again, we invite you to take a look at Bird Camp. We're excited about it. It's like a more extensive story time with activities. The kids will receive 3 packages during Bird Camp with activities that they'll be using during the weeks of camp. So look for our information on our website. We have some more description and a registration. And of course, you can write us if you have any questions, and we hope to see you there as well. So today we're going to read the book Numenia and the Hurricane by Fiona Halliday. And Fiona actually illustrated this book. It's a beautiful story, and so we're excited to share it with you. And of course, we're doing this as part of our World Migratory Bird Day efforts to teach people about migratory birds and how to help them at home. Usually, you know, we would be doing Migratory Bird Day at sites and parks, but because of the situation right now, we know that a lot of people can't do public education programs. So we're helping out by doing these virtual programmings. So today we're going to learn about hurricanes. We're going to read the book. We're going to make a hurricane and meet a hurricane scientist from NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. So it's a very busy day. But first, I want to get started with what's our bird today. And so this is a whimbrel. And I want you to look at this bird and tell me what you notice about it. We've talked a little bit before about birds that are called shorebirds. Those are birds that kind of live by the ocean. Although this one doesn't nest by it can nest by water, but it goes way up into Alaska, northern Canada, where it's going to nest. But what do you notice about this bird? What kind of characteristics does it have? Look at its color and its beak and its feet. We've talked a lot about those. What do you notice about this bird? Yes, it has a very long beak. And you can see that beak, once we talked about how that beak helps a bird to eat. It also has these funny feet. And remember that these birds are walking in mud. And when they walk in mud, they need some help. You know, when you walk in mud, you can sink in the mud. But when this bird walks in the mud to find its food, what it's doing is those toes that spread out help it to stay on top of the mud so it doesn't sink and get stuck. And why is its beak so long? Why is its beak so long? That's because this bird will put that beak into the ground and pull out its food. And what does it eat? What do you think this bird eats? What do you think this bird eats? Any guesses? I'm going to show you a picture of it standing in the mud. Okay, very good. It can eat fish. And good job. It does eat worms. So it eats some special food that it finds in the ground, in the mud. So for example, here's a crab. It loves to eat crabs, and it has that long beak which helps it to hold it. But when it's probing in the mud, it can pull out things like these worms. Looks kind of slimy to me. And these things that are called sea slugs. So it has a big variety of foods that it eats. And even when it goes up to where it nests, it can eat berries, and that helps it to nest. It might be the only thing it finds when it's up on a kind of habitat that's called the tundra, which has like short shrubs. It's not even the sand and the mud. So the whimbrel is a pretty amazing bird, but it's most amazing because it flies so far on migration. And the story that we're going to read today tells us about a whimbrel. Now, this is a map that shows the United States and Mexico and parts of the world. And if you have a parent there, you could look on this map and see where you live. Like I see people are from Oregon, and Oregon is on the map. Alaska's also on the map, although it's placed at the bottom of the map, not really where Alaska is located. But this whimbrel can fly very long distances. So see that green line going all the way from Canada where it nests down to the islands in the Caribbean and beyond. And one of its stopping places are the islands in the Caribbean. And this story that we're going to read today is a true story about a whimbrel named Hope who made a migration but got caught in a big storm. So before we start our story, I want to ask you, what is it that birds need to migrate? And what would you take if you were migrating? Who remembers what the word migrate means? What does the word migrate means? Hey, Pranjal, I'm glad to see you on again. What does the word migrate mean? Okay, right, to travel. It means to travel. And migrate is a little special because, especially when you use it with animals, because it means that they do it regularly. So for like the whimbrel flies back and forth and back and forth. So it makes 2 long trips each year, one to get to nesting sites and one when it's not nesting to go back to places where it's not too cold and the food isn't gone and it can find its food and it can survive. So let's just take a look. If you were going to migrate, basically take a trip. Let's talk about what you would need or who would need what. Who gets the suitcase, for example? The person or the bird? Who gets the suitcase? I'm sure that's an easy one. Yes, the person gets the suitcase. And how about the sweater? Who needs a sweater to travel? Maybe not if you're going to a beach vacation in the middle of summer, but who needs the sweater? Well, of course, the person. All right, let's see what else we have here. The next one is the worm. And remember, we just talked about the whimbrel and how it eats worms. And so when it travels, it has to have food. Otherwise, it can't make its long distance journey. So it has to be able to eat along the way. How about, what is that big blob of yellow stuff? Who knows what that is? That big blob of yellow. What is that? Any ideas? I know it looks weird. Okay, it looks like cheese. I have a couple cheeses. It's not cheese, although it looks like it. It's actually butter. But what I wanted to represent was fat. Now, birds really need fat. And when birds fly, they need that fat to help provide them with the energy that it takes to make the entire journey. Now, where does the bird put that fat? It doesn't put it in a suitcase. When a bird migrates, before it starts migrating, it starts eating and eating and eating and eating. It eats like it's just so hungry because it's getting ready and knows it needs that energy to migrate. And where it puts the fat, I want you to reach in your shirt right here. You see this hollowy place right here, and feel that. And on me, it's kind of empty, right? And the reason why mine is empty here is because that's not where humans put their fat, right? I put my fat on my belly and other places on my body, amazing places where fat goes on me. How about you? Where does your fat go? But on a bird, when they store fat, one of the places that they store it is right here. And it looks like this lump of cheese or butter or whatever it looks like. It's kind of yellow. So if you were to catch a whimbrel right before it migrated and it was getting ready to leave and it had had a lot of good food, you would find a very full area right here that would look yellow and lumpy. And you'd know that that bird is saving up its fat for something, or it's having a good season. Sometimes they can have fat other times of the year, but especially before migration, they want as much fat as possible so that they can make that migration. All right, how about, does anybody get the flower? Does anybody need a flower to migrate or to travel? Does anything need a flower or to migrate or travel? No. How about the toothbrush? Who needs a toothbrush? Do birds have teeth? Do birds have teeth? Yeah. Human, obviously, Pranjal, and no, birds don't have teeth. So this is very easy, especially for those of you who have been coming. The person needs a ticket, the person needs a toothbrush, and the bird gets the fat. And of course, there's a lot more things that we need. All right, before we talk to our scientists, we're just going to briefly talk about storms. One of the big factors that can affect birds when they migrate are these storms. And we've talked about a lot of things that can harm birds on a journey. But look at all these storms and think about, what should these storms do you have? Where I live in Colorado, we have snowstorms and we have windstorms and we have rainstorms and we have tornadoes. On the coast, there are other kinds of storms. There are also big disasters like fires that put out lots of smoke and fire and burn down trees. And then there are tornadoes. So if a bird is migrating, they might not always know when these storms are going to happen. Some of them come very rapidly. They don't know, and they don't have a weather report to help them check the weather before they start on migration. So it's really difficult for a bird. And we're going to talk about that after we read our story. So for now, what we're going to do, we're going to start the story. After the story, we're going to bring on our scientist, and then you'll have a chance to ask questions. So I'm going to close my camera and leave only the story up so we can focus on that. So again, this is Numenia and the hurricane. And for those of you who might have studied birds a little more, my challenge question to you is, what does Numenia mean? And I'll look and see if anybody has an answer at the end of the book. So Numenia and the hurricane, a true story about a migration. Suddenly, it's equinox. Oops, I'm sorry. 3 sisters born by Arctic shore on bare, cold rock as spring winds roar. Bandit-eyed, they slip unseen through beckoning moors of tangled green, hunting bugs and thawing creeks, spearing, gobbling, growing beaks. 5 weeks old, they've reached the sky. Curlee, curlee, curlew, they cry. Suddenly, it's equinox. Autumn calls its feathered flocks. Thousands gather on the moor, babbling, jostling, but unsure. Till wise old goose shows them the way, surging out of Hudson Bay. 3 sisters rise and seek the height, guided by the North Star's light. But from the skies a great stampede, 10,000 hissing raindrops freed. One ripped away, she claws the air, blinded by the lightning glare. Down she swoops, her feathers flail, a tiny peep, a screeching wail. Escape, escape, the awful shriek, faltering, she's wet and weak. Askew upon a window sill, a dripping ghost with trembling bill. A moon face in a glowing pane, fingers reaching through the rain. In restless dreams, she's one of 3 sisters in a tangled tree. She lifts her eyes, she longs for flight, surging into dawn's red light. On stronger wings she battles on, searching, seeking, she is drawn. With storm-tossed birds like ragged ghosts, she hugs the lines of battered coasts. She's half the weight she was before, a clutch of hope and nothing more. But from the sigh of distant waves, echoes sweet and haunting staves. Curlee, curlee, curlew, they ring. Through sundered skies her feathers sing. In crumbled rainbows spindrift spun, she's molten gold in sinking sun. Wild trees wade the foaming tide, egrets hiss, fish glint and glide. Around her roots snatch and trap, paw her, claw her, croak and flap. Then weary-winged, she sinks her toes in rippling warmth, it's home she knows. And cloaked in dancing fireflies, singing softly, 2 shapes rise. Here, where moon and shadows meet, 3 joyful sisters softly greet. And so their bond is forged anew, curlee, curlee, curlew. And that is the end of the story. And that is a true story. So it's a true story about a whimbrel who migrated from Canada, got caught in a hurricane. And as all of you who know who've been on here before, there are ways of tracking birds. And this bird was tracked and survived the hurricane. And then it was actually found on one of the islands in the Caribbean. And so that is how they knew, because they had a transmitter on this bird. That's how they knew that it survived the migration. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this over to our guest presenter, Michelle. And Michelle, you can unmute yourself and maybe tell a little bit about where you work and what you do, and I'll make you the presenter in the meantime.
And no worries. So, hey everybody, sorry, I still was trying to be able to allow you to see me, but I was having some issues still. It's funny, I was saying that though I work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is, you guys probably associate with the Mars rover, it's very technologically savvy. I am probably very not tech savvy, as you can see, because you cannot see me right now. But overall, what I do at JPL is I use all the different satellites that are above Earth to tell you about how the oceans are changing, and how certain events on Earth, such as hurricanes, impact people and also impact the ocean. So what made me so intrigued by hurricanes when I was a kid, I'm a native Floridian, so I grew up in Florida. My Nana, my grandma, lived in southern Florida and went through Hurricane Andrew, which hit as a Category 5. And you're probably like, what is a Category 5? That's the most intense hurricane you can have. So she, contrary to what she was supposed to do, stayed in her home, and she did make it out, and there was a lot of damage and destruction around her. My family and I were living close by, and we came down to check on her, and I witnessed firsthand all the destruction and damage associated with Hurricane Andrew, and it just was interesting to me that this event on the Earth system could do this. So to show you guys sort of some of the reasons I got intrigued by hurricanes, and let's see, is there a way to minimize this, Sue? Do I just push this over? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we can't see
Oh yeah.
anything, yeah, except your screen.
Okay, perfect. So this is a hurricane. So as you can see by the hurricane, you have these massive wind bands. So that's what you're seeing here, and they wrap in this sort of clockwise rotation, and you have something here in the middle called an eye. So there have been lots of stories of people that have gone through hurricanes, that basically they get these strong winds, and that's where all the destruction and damage occurs. But in this eye, there's calm, basically no winds. So sometimes when people are going through hurricanes, they talk about all this destruction. They'll reach this calm, which is sometimes eerie, and that's when they're in the eye, and then the rest of the storm comes. But we can see hurricanes like this from space, which is what you're seeing. So here we actually have these little fins associated with the International Space Station. And what they're doing is they're looking at it from the International Space Station before, well, this is actually open ocean, but before it made landfall. So if I go to the next, so if you all have heard about a hurricane, or maybe you have not, generally this is what people associate with the term hurricane. We think destruction and damage on land, right? And it does some amazing things that I would have never thought a natural event could do. It can take boats out in the middle of the ocean and put them on land. Here you have on a bridge and road. This was actually Hurricane Sandy, which hit the New York, New Jersey area in 2012. And you can see this massive boardwalk, that this is what it was before Hurricane Sandy hit, and this is what remained post. It can take palm trees, which are extremely sturdy, and it can just snap them like twigs. And then this is even amazing. This is actually what inspired me, because I saw this firsthand during Hurricane Andrew in Florida, that these palm trees, which are so strong, a hurricane is so intense that it can take pieces of wood like this and actually project it through the tree itself. I mean, it is amazing what it can do, but then it also creates this horrible destruction and damage. So that's generally what you associate with a hurricane. But what I want to tell to you guys is hurricanes are not all bad. Don't have a negative association with them. It is horrible that clearly it impacts us because we live on the coast or even inland through rain, but they do have a purpose and they are a natural response of the Earth system, helping the planet maintain its temperature. So like you, when you're sick and your mom or dad take your temperature and you have a fever, your parents might give you some medicine to help reduce that fever. Hurricanes are that medicine for the Earth system. So what you're seeing here is actually a satellite image of the oceans, and the red indicates warmer waters, whereas you get towards the poles, you're getting these blue and purple, meaning colder. So you can see it's extremely warm at the tropics, and then it starts getting cooler as you get to the poles. So during the summer months, when hurricanes form, the tropics actually get even warmer than this. So they get extremely, extremely warm. So the Earth says, I need something. I can't just be extremely warm at the tropics and then have the poles be extremely cold. So the medicine it takes is it generates hurricanes. And the hurricanes then, for example, if we use this basin, they come off Africa and they would take all this warmth and then they carry it to the poles. So each time they're going from the tropics or the equator and they transport all that heat to the poles, helping the Earth reduce its temperature. So that's sort of a fun way to think about that. So generally, as I said, hurricanes happen in the summer months because this region here gets extremely warm. So given that, do you guys have any thoughts as where you think hurricanes might occur? Do you think they would happen sort of in this region? Or even over here and here? So based upon this temperature, we get a good idea of where hurricanes occur. So where that warm water was is what you're seeing is where they actually occur. So all you're seeing from these sort of like spaghetti lines is basically these are just all different hurricane tracks for a set time period, and the temperatures that you're showing are in fact the intensities. So you see that over here in this region of the Western Pacific, you actually get more hurricanes that are more intense, and the reason why is over here the waters are even warmer than, let's say, in the Atlantic. So that's where hurricanes form, and this is actually an animation. There we go. This is of the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season. So here you have, Florida, and then over here in Colorado, and over here is California. But overall, you're seeing the hurricane season for this occurs in May, and you can start seeing them happen. And the reason why it begins in May, as I mentioned, the waters are starting to get extremely warm. The temperatures within this region actually peak in the August to October timeframe. So that's generally when you get the majority of storms that are actually the most intense. And you're going to see one happen here in a second called Florence. So she should be, there she is. So you can see Florence actually came off the coast of Africa and it actually made landfall in North Carolina. But as you can see, as she went, there was the warm water, but left in the trail, you see cooler waters shown by sort of an orange character. So the hurricanes need the warm waters to fuel themselves. So basically there are these massive sort of heat engines going over the ocean, sucking up all this warm water from below. But you can imagine that warm water only extends so far, and then there's colder water. So as the hurricane moves and uses up that ocean heat, it's bringing up the cold waters from below. So we generally can see sort of these things that we call cold wakes behind the storm. And the reason why those are so important for us is if a hurricane, as you can see, they sort of move at different speeds. If a hurricane slows down, what happens is the warm water it needs to fuel itself starts diminishing because it's using it up, and that cold water is coming up. So if a hurricane stays in one place for too long, it can weaken. And if another hurricane track crosses over that cold wake, it can actually weaken it as well. So looking at this from space really helps us get an idea of A, that these hurricanes are forming and might be making landfall, but then also how intense they might be upon making landfall. Oops, and let's go to the next, there we go. So you heard me say hurricane. Hurricane is actually one, and I've lost my mouse, it seems. But a hurricane is one of several features that fits under this umbrella called tropical cyclone. So you might hear tropical cyclone, it's a generic term, where hurricane is a particular classification. Oh geez, but I lost my mouse. But what you can see here is you have these are the different stages. So you have a tropical disturbance, and what makes you go through these different stages is, as you can see, these are clouds. So you can see that a tropical disturbance is just a blob of clouds. As you get to a tropical depression, you start seeing that they're becoming more organized and they're starting sort of that rotation. Tropical storm becomes more organized, and a hurricane, you see that distinct rotation of the clouds as well as that eye developing. And a hurricane has 5 different classifications. There's a hurricane 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what those associations mean is a hurricane category 1 has strong winds, but it's not as strong and will not cause as much damage as a hurricane 5. So to illustrate that, what you guys see, this is a YouTube animation. So it's taking you through on the bottom the different categories of hurricanes. So category 1, which is happening right now, you have some tree branches that will be down. Hurricane category 2, you start getting more effects upon the house. But as you hit category 3 through 5, these are called major hurricanes, you see significant damage happening around you. So these are when you should not be in your home and you should evacuate to safer, higher ground. So it just takes you through. And category 5, as I said, Hurricane Andrew, which is what my Nana went through, it was something similar to that. So that's what made me interested in sort of studying hurricanes, that damage I saw. And then once I got into it, I learned not only do hurricanes impact us humans, but as you just heard from the story, they impact all life on Earth, including wildlife. So you heard this great story about the whimbrel. There's actually multiple stories about whimbrels because they migrate during hurricane season in the Atlantic. So the little one you have here down at the bottom is another great story in which the whimbrel migrated from Canada down to South America, but interacted with this hurricane, Hurricane Irene of 2011, and lived to tell the tale. And then there's some other wildlife as you see here. So this is a manatee. Manatees live in freshwater systems like rivers in Florida. And the manatees obviously need water to survive. And this one was, given the high winds and waves, it actually was transported on land. So this manatee was rescued, so everything's okay, but it does do some significant things to all life on Earth. So that's it, you guys.
That was great. I learned so much. Hey,
oh, perfect.
I appreciated that. Does anybody have a question? We have from the Levine family that they were in Hurricane Irene in Delaware and got evacuated.
Yes.
Do you have any questions? I was wondering if you could explain, how do hurricanes get their names?
Oh, great question. That's always actually very fun. So depending on the region, so as I showed sort of in here, they're all called tropical cyclones, but depending on where you are, they might have some fun names. So first and foremost, we call them hurricanes, right? But in the Western tropical Pacific, you might hear the name typhoons, and in some places in Australia, they're sometimes called whirlies and things of that sort. So each basin has different ways in which they name the hurricanes. So I'll speak mainly to what we do in the US. So there's a group called the National Hurricane Center located here in Miami, and they put out, before the hurricane season begins, they actually come up with a list all the way from A through Z of names for hurricanes for that upcoming season. The names themselves have changed through time. New names come in, old names, you can actually suggest some names. They try and make it culturally diverse based upon the different cultures we have in the US. And when a hurricane, though, some names you might, if you ever look and see, oh, is my name on the hurricane list for, let's say, 2020, which we're going through right now, hurricane season just started. If your name is not on that list and doesn't appear in history, it might be because the hurricane associated with your name was so intense and caused damage that then the name is retired. So for example, there was a Hurricane Michelle, it hit the Caribbean, and I believe it was a category 3. The damage and destruction it caused allowed it, well, caused it to be retired. There's also some significant storms you might have heard. I don't know about Irene, to tell you the truth, but there was a Hurricane Rita of 2005, which is still on the top of some of the deadliest, most damaging and expensive storms in history. And of course, that one has been retired as well. So definitely check it out and see if your name is on that list.
Okay, so we have a couple questions. And for those of you who are asking questions, if you want to be on camera so Michelle can see you, just put that in the chat box. We have a question about, when is hurricane season?
Oh, great question. So within the Atlantic and the East Pacific, hurricane season begins, well, for the Atlantic specifically, June 1st, and it runs through November 30th. So generally, June and July are, you'll see some storms, but the majority, as I said, because the waters are the warmest in August through October, that's when you're going to see the majority of storms take place within the Atlantic region. And generally they might be a little bit more intense, and hopefully they don't make landfall, but some of them actually, as you can see, stay in the open ocean. Here in the Eastern Pacific, it actually runs May 15th through November 30th. So it's just 15 days ahead of time, but overall June through November.
Okay, great, thanks. And Pranjal wants to know, why do all the hurricanes get a female name?
Oh, well, so that's a great point. They don't. So it just so happens that the ones I mentioned to you, unfortunately, were all female storms, but there have been a slew of male names. So if we actually go back to this animation, you can see that some of the first ones, I believe there was an Albert, and then there was maybe it was a Bert. There's been a Gordon, a Howard, Hugo. So there's a lot of actually both male and female. They try and make it very even each year on the gender between the names.
All right. Let's see. We had one person who wanted to come on camera to talk to you, but to the Levine family, I can't seem to get you switched to be, oh, there we go. No, that's Nicole Walker. I can't seem to get your name to switch to be accepted on as a panelist. It says you're connected to the web or something. Okay, any other questions from anybody? I don't think we have any more questions. That was great, Michelle. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
I love talking about this stuff. So.
Yeah, so what we're going to do now is we are going to do a little science experiment and show them how to make their own tornado and hurricane. So we're going to do that in a glass bowl, and we're going to bring in two of our staff to do that. I don't know if you've ever done this, Michelle, with classes.
I think I've done the tornado.
Oh, you've done the tornado. Well, I don't know what you think about this one with the bowl, but hang on just a second, and maybe you can help us with it a little bit and describe maybe some of the physics of this, since that is definitely not what I'm good at. Let's see. So we're going to share the webcam, and we have some helpers in here, and I'm going to turn off my screen, so that what you see is, this is Jorge. Jorge is working for us doing some data analysis, actually, but he is two-timing as a science experiment leader. So what we have here is a bowl of water. So this is something you guys can do at home. And he's going to show how, and maybe you can speak to this, Michelle, in terms of like the winds that would be picking up over the water. He's going to show how those become stronger. And then what we're going to do is use a little bit of food coloring so that you can watch that swirling. You can see the picture. Oh, I think I quit showing my screen, but when you saw that photo that Michelle showed of the circle getting more and more organized with the eye at the center. Hopefully we won't make a huge mess.
You don't keep turning, you let it.
Uh-oh, we might have had a science experiment mess up here.
Do the tornado.
Okay, we're gonna do the tornado and then we'll come back with this one. We spun it a little too much. So your second, we're gonna do the hurricane again, but let's go to the tornado. Tornado in a jar, it's called. So this one's a fun one too. And this one also shows the strength of the winds that you get in a tornado. So you use a little bit of hand sanitizer into the jar. And close your jar. And we've added a few beads at the bottom. Michelle, do you have any comments? Are you still on? Shake
yes,
it.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yes.
And then watch can you see the tornado in there?
Yep.
I think they were good. I let them see there. You can see it forming at the top. Let's do it one more time. Jorge's getting a workout. There you go. So you see the funnel, and then all the beads would represent kind of all the stuff in the surroundings that might be affected by the tornado. Michelle, can you tell us what's the difference between a tornado and a hurricane?
Oh, completely. So first off, I'll say for hurricanes, they can actually include tornadoes within them because so what forms a tornado is, and sorry, I'm going to get super like weather geek on you. When you have two different air masses coming together, so when you have a storm, and sometimes you might have heard the word front, if a meteorologist on TV says like a front is coming through, expect some severe weather. Generally what that means is there's two different air masses coming through. So they might have different temperatures and different humidities. And when they sort of come in contact with each other, it can sort of, it creates this instability and can create these tornadoes, which is their way of sort of like getting rid of that effect, right? So tornadoes can occur in association with severe weather on just normal basis. But during hurricanes, they can also occur just in those massive wind bands that I showed you guys that we could see from the clouds. There can be tornadoes within that. And tornadoes can actually occur over land, but they can also occur over the ocean. And when they're over the ocean, they're called water spouts. And they're pretty cool to see. They're generally much weaker, and they're just very pretty. Where on land, obviously, they're very intense and can be very destructive and damaging.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to let them do the hurricane one more time. And then we have two more questions, or one question and an answer from the Zellner and the Levine family. Okay. Are you ready? Okay. Is that going to work?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, so you can kind of see how that swirling and the red dye shows you that movement of what would be the wind current. Okay. I think leave it. That's good. Anyway, just a simple science experiment to do it at home. Thanks, you guys. So we had here Jorge, Chuyu, and helping us for fun. Thank you so much, you guys. All right, I'm going to turn off that camera and I'm going to put back up my presentation. So let's see, we had a couple of responses. So the question is, I don't know if you can answer this, Michelle, but is it common for birds to migrate through hurricanes?
So I think it's just one of those things. Birds have a set, and you can probably speak more to this. They do have a set time, just like all life, that they have a set time in which they typically migrate and they try and return to the area in which they were hatched or were born to, have their own youth, such as like sea turtles, right? Because we generally, anyways, aside from that, I talk more marine life than anything. So the migration pattern sort of set in stone as to when it occurs. And it just so happens it overlaps with when hurricanes are forming in the Atlantic, right? So if they're in Canada and they're migrating to South America, I don't think they took into effect and could do anything about, if a hurricane's forming in the North Atlantic. So it's just a situation that occurs, unfortunately. And again, and it's the story you heard about Hope. She was able to make it through, as do other whimbrels and probably other birds. Some birds that live actually in the areas in which are impacted by hurricanes. So for example, say in Florida, in South Florida, there's a bird called an ibis. And it's actually the mascot of one of the universities down there. And the ibis and some of the other birds, generally they have a sense that something's coming, and they can actually evacuate the area. And sometimes in the past, before people had hurricanes, and some history shows, that based upon birds and other wildlife, based upon how they were reacting, people were sort of alerted that something might be coming. So for example, the ibis was one that generally they're associated with hurricanes, and they can sort of not sense, but something in the air, if you will, and they can evacuate and warn sort of people. But now we have satellites that tell you days, weeks in advance that something's coming. And we have some amazing models that tell you what intensity it could be and where it might make landfall. So technology, back in the day, we do have some amazing tells, but technology definitely helps now with reducing the loss of life.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, for birds, everyone, you know, we don't know how many actually get caught in storms. We do know occasionally you might see a report like, oh, this bird from, you know, some other country was found, and I think there was a falcon that was found in Washington, D.C. a couple years ago, and it probably got off track because of a storm. Sometimes they get blown off track. But we don't know if they are flying through, you know, an actual hurricane or through a storm, or how many survive. We just wouldn't know that unless they had, you know, if we were tracking them like some of these whimbrels that have been tracked. So that's one of the things that helps us learn about how birds survive. So I asked you a question at the very beginning of this. I asked about Numenia, and I think so for the Levine family, I think you said that you figured that out. So I'm going to unmute the Levine family. Do you want to share is that the answer you found? To the Levine family, you are unmuted.
We found the answer to a different question, actually.
Okay, what's the different question?
Oh, it was just a question that Milo had that he needed the answer to, and so we looked it up.
Well, Milo, if you want to say hello to Michelle, you can do that now.
Hi.
Hi, Milo.
Did you want to ask the question?
What's the wait, no.
No? Okay, you don't have to. All right, we'll mute ourselves since we don't have the answer.
That's fine. Thanks so much. Did
Sure.
anyone figure out where our whimbrel got the name Numenia? Where did the whimbrel get the name Numenia? I mean, that's a funny name. So why would somebody name a story after, or name a whimbrel Numenia? Any ideas out there? Okay, well, I'm going to give it to you then. It comes from the scientific name of the whimbrel. So that's actually, if you're learning about birds, that's actually the genus is Numenius. And so that is where they got the name Numenia for the bird. So that's part of this, you know, every bird has two names. It has a common name, at least two names. It has a common name, and then it has what's called a scientific name. And the scientific name is the name it uses no matter where it is. But the common name is the name that, for example, we call it, like we call it a whimbrel, but in other countries, they don't call it a whimbrel. They have another name for it. But the scientific name is like its code. So it's the same no matter where you go. All right, everybody. That was a wonderful time. Michelle, I want to thank you again for joining us. It's not every time everybody on the line that you get to meet a NASA scientist on Storytime. So we really appreciate your taking the time out of your day to do this. And it was really great.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure coming to talk to you.
And have a good rest of your day. And we will send you a Birds Connect Our World t-shirt. I'll get your address.
Oh, would love that.
Yeah, thank you. And for everybody online, if you're interested, we have Bird Camp coming up this summer. We have 2 age groups. We'll be doing some similar topics, but of course the 8 to 11-year-olds are going to have a much more advanced program where we'll be bringing in bird experts to teach about bird identification, as well as some other science aspects of birds. And we hope that you can all join us. If you have any questions, please pop us an email at info@environmentamericas.org, or we're happy to stay on the line and answer any questions now. But again, thanks so much for coming today and for your great questions and your interactions with Michelle. I hope you all have a good rest of your week and a good weekend.